Thank you. First, I want to say thank you to the Religious Coalition for Violence-Free Rhode Island for organizing tonight's vigil. And I want to speak about guns in 1 minute, but I want to just start by acknowledging the moment in which we are living and the challenges which we face. And the words of our governor, I hope everyone realizes that those words are not uttered by governors in every state in this country. No. It's really a blessing that we have a governor who not only speaks of those values, but lives them every day and ensures that they're embodied in the work that she's leading in our state. At a very precarious and anxious time for so many residents of Rhode Island, it is, I think, a tremendous comfort for all of us to hear our state leader articulate those words of comfort and the passion with which she delivered them. And we have that also in our great treasurer, who's used his office to find ways to make corporate America diversify its boards and create economic opportunity for so many. We have it with our mayor, both our mayors who have done so much work to create hope and opportunity and a safe place for constituents in their respective cities. So I want to just salute my colleagues and thank them for their service, not only for being here tonight, but for all that they do. And so I think, as the governor was saying, this is a time where there's tremendous anxiety. It feels strange to talk about gun violence without just taking a minute to talk about the Senate. And I want to tell you 3 quick stories that I think really evidence this. I was at YPI, Youth Pride, a couple of weeks ago, and I said to the executive director, I'd like to come back. It was a fundraiser. I said, I'd like to come back and just talk to the young people because I bet there's a lot of anxiety. And I want to at least let them know not everybody thinks the way that they might these people think. And I want them to know what I'm trying to do in Washington and just answer their questions. And so we had dinner last night, and it was about 20 kids. And, lots of questions and lots of anxiety. And one young woman raised her hand and said, and there's a lot of fear. And she said, Congressman, do you think they're going to make us go to conversion therapy? And my heart sank that, this young woman had to even think about the prospect of that. And, I said, of course not. And we won't let that happen. But it was an indication of the fear and anxiety that persists. And that's an example that exists in many other communities. The second story I want to tell you is I was on a panel last week in Washington, and one of the women on the panel was a woman from Guatemala who was the first lesbian elected to Congress in Guatemala. She was listening to all these people in the audience kind of wring their hands about Trump and what was going to happen. And she said, I want to tell you a story. She said, I began a protest in my country. There were 20 of us. And we walked to the Capitol. By the time we got there were tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people protesting the government. And today, the president and vice president of my country are in prison because of the corruption. And that happened because we walked to the Capitol and demanded it. And I tell you this story to remind you that the people have the power. And it was a really important moment. And the third story is yesterday I was at CBS. I happened into a good Rhode Island company, and I happened into a friend of mine named Kathy, and she said, how are you? And I said, I gave the same answer. This is so horrible, and I don't know. And she said, it's going to be fine. And she's this great progressive. I said, how can you be so sure it's going to be fine? She said, remember, there are many more good people in America than there are bad people. And this will be an awakening for all the good people. We will be fine. And so I think in those 3 stories you see the real fear and anxiety, the fact that we have the power to affect the future in this country, and in fact we can have confidence that the good people outnumber the bad people. So I think just it's important to kind of, and I also think as part of my religious tradition, the responsibility that we have for Tikkun Olam, to heal the world. I'm trying to show off because my rabbi's here. This is our responsibility. So I just wanted to make that observation because I think we're all struggling through kind of how to make sense of what just happened in our country. But on the issue of gun violence, tonight we are gathered in particular to remember those that we have lost and to remember the victims of gun violence. And yesterday, marked the 4-year anniversary of the shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School, where we lost 20 children and 6 adult staff members. And I really actually thought that was the moment then finally this country and Congress in particular would do something. These were babies, riddled with bullets 6, 7, 10 times. And I thought, this will be the occasion that will finally force Congress to do something. And of course, it didn't. I think every time we think about the magnitude of this problem, 85,000 people lose their life to gun violence in this country every single day. It's more than 30,000 people a year. It's almost hard to comprehend those numbers. But behind every one of those numbers, 118 guns per 100 people in this country, meaning more than 1 gun per man, woman, and child in America. There's no other country that comes close to that. So when people think, guns are a problem everywhere, that is not the case. We have a gun epidemic problem in this country, which doesn't exist anywhere else in the developed world. And so, as was mentioned, part of this is also, a lot of people blame the NRA. I'm proud to say I have an F- rating. I've had one since I got elected. But the truth is, Washington is filled with lobbyists and special interest advocates. That's nothing new. So I don't actually blame the NRA. I blame my colleagues in Congress who don't have the courage to do what's right for their constituents and the American people, and to stand up to the powerful special interests of the NRA and the gun lobby. So that's where the responsibility lies. And what I think is particularly important tonight is that as we think about those statistics and those numbers, to remember behind every one of them is a family, is a story. I was in Orlando recently and went to the Pulse Nightclub and read on the wall of remembrance there these heartbreaking stories of people talking about the young people who lost their lives that night, doing something that only we do as a human species to celebrate and enjoy. We dance. Nobody else does that. And while they were enjoying music and the company of one another in a safe place, a place they thought was safe, the 59 people were slaughtered. And so I think, we should use this occasion to not only recommit ourselves to the work, but to remember the real stories. Some of us, John Lewis, Catherine Clark, and I organized a sit-in on the House floor because we were sick of Congress, particularly the Republicans' refusal to do anything. And I introduced the assault weapons ban. I introduced a number of bills to make it more difficult for people who are seriously mentally ill to have access to a firearm, to keep guns out of the hands of people. There are over 200 proposals. We begged them, do something. Keep guns out of the hands of terrorists. Keep guns out of the hands of people who have criminal backgrounds. Take some action. But what they did after the Pulse Nightclub is the same thing they've done in every other mass shooting. They spent 1 minute saying nothing and doing nothing, a moment of silence. And we just couldn't take it anymore, and so we staged a sit-in, and we did a sit-in here in Rhode Island. The mayor was there, both mayors. And a couple came up to me, Mr. and Mrs. O'Neill, who lost their son at Virginia Tech. They live in Lincoln, Rhode Island. He said, Congressman, we can't thank you enough. When we saw the sit-in, we started to cry, and we thought, finally someone's trying to do something about the way Daniel died. And so it was a reminder that as much as this seems frustrating and it seems like we aren't making progress, as the governor said, people are really counting on us. And we have a responsibility and we owe an obligation to the people who have lost their lives, and we need to do it at the state level. I know Linda Finn is here, who's been such a champion of gun violence in the General Assembly. We have a responsibility at the state level to do it. The governor has been leading the effort here as well. We have a responsibility to do it in Washington. But we should do it because we owe it to the people who have suffered so much because of gun violence in this country. And I know the mayor will appreciate this. There's nothing worse as an elected official, as a mayor of a city, to have to sit with a parent at Rhode Island Hospital or go to their home and say, I have bad news for you. The child that you brought into this world that you love has died to become a victim of gun violence. That happens too many times in our state, too many times all across this country. And so as we remember the lives that have been lost, I hope we will all use this as an occasion to re-energize ourselves for this really important struggle to bring sensible gun violence prevention legislation to reality, both at the state level and at the federal level. And don't be persuaded that we can't, because we can and we must. And although this has been a long struggle, I think victory is on the horizon. Thank you.